36% of the European LGBTQ community still faces discrimination, and women still earn 12% less than men. Equal rights are not yet a reality, even in Europe. But what or who stands in the way? Why is equality such a contested objective, and can it ultimately be reached? We talked to an activist about her struggles for equality.
21% of European citizens say they experienced discrimination or harassment in the previous year. Women earn 12% less than men per hour on average. Europe has one of the strongest legal systems in terms of protection of human rights, also gender equality, but still, of course, equality is not lived in the same way for all European citizens. I'm a woman, and at the same time, I get discriminated also because of my age, because I'm 24. I get discriminated because I have a chronic illness. I get discriminated also because I have Chilean origins. As soon as you speak about gender equality, as soon as you speak about LGBT rights, your work is going to be framed as gender dictatorship. And I have the privilege of being literally framed in this way multiple times, including by Giorgia Meloni. My dream is to go one day and say, nice to meet you, Isabella De Gregorio, gender dictator.
Our guest, Isabella Sofia De Gregorio, is the founder and president of Eduxo.eu, European Network for Democracy and Equality, a non-profit organization fighting for gender equality, LGBTQ+, and abortion rights. Through education, advocacy campaigns, and civic lobbying, Eduxo.eu promotes a democratic and progressive agenda. As a committed feminist and lesbian activist, Isabella speaks with us about Europe's ongoing culture wars with conservative movements, how she responds to insults and backlash, and about the enduring influence of the church on political decision-making.
Isabella, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be here.
Thanks a lot. You're the founder and the president of Eduxo,
Exactly.
The European Network of Democracy and Equality. Now, it is true that in Europe, equality is not yet an objective which has been reached. There is still a lot of inequality going around. Do you think that this objective is reachable at all?
Yes. So my straightforward answer is yes. Actually, I had a debate with a psychologist that told me like values cannot be reached. And I was like, that's completely untrue. We can reach equality, we can reach justice. So speaking about Europe, European citizens enjoy a strong framework of equal rights. We can think about free movement, we can think about legal protection, we can think about civic rights, we can think about anti-discrimination rights. And all these rights are safeguarded under the European Union's values for equality, dignity, and non-discrimination. Of course, in practice, the picture is more complex. For example, the European Commission and the European Parliament, I have some data here, and they say that discrimination based on gender, ethnic origin, religion, belief, disability, age, and so on is still a daily reality for many people. The gap is visible in the data. So according to the last Eurobarometer, 21% of European citizens said they experienced discrimination or harassment in the previous year. So not in their life, in the previous year. And over half believe that discrimination is widespread in their country. So also the Eurostat reports that even among native-born people, 3% they experience discrimination in public spaces. In this sense, what I would say is that equality in Europe highly depends on geography and where you are based and where are you from. So of course, EU law provide a general legal standard, but then the effective protection of all these rights, of course, depend on the national law sometimes, and also governments, so political divergence, but at the same time, not very done correctly enforcement. And also there is the thing that analysts call the implementation gap. So even if, of course, in the EU, there is a directive or there is a strategy that say that they have and must implement something, then it takes decades maybe to reach that objective. My answer is still yes. Europe has one of the strongest legal systems in terms of protection of human rights, also gender equality. But still, of course, equality is not lived in the same way for all European citizens. So yeah, now the challenge and also our work is making sure that actually equality can be lived by everyone.
You mentioned there are a couple of examples for inequality, gender, but also LGBTQ. We know that you are very vocal on these topics. On gender, for instance, there is still a difference of 12% of what women get paid and what men get paid. And in some countries, Latvia, Estonia, it's even 20%. So why is this gap so persistent? Why is it still there?
If we're speaking about gender equality and, for example, the gender pay gap, I think it's persistent, and we have also to think that gender equality is not just about how much women are paid compared to men. That's not only that, it's a small part of the amount of discrimination that women can live. And actually, the gender gap reflects a whole system of inequalities that are present in the labor market, but also in private life. So yeah, as you said, women earn 12% less than men per hour on average. But I found a research from the European Commission that actually says that this gap is made by segregation, of course, unpaid care responsibilities, the glass ceiling to reach specific levels of leadership or to enter the job market, and in some cases, of course, also direct discrimination, gender-based violence, and pay discrimination. So as you said, there is a big difference in all member states. What I want to say here is that for me, the key is to analyze any and every social challenge with the lens of intersectionality. And that's also the approach that Eduxo uses to every policy, because gender inequality also interacts with race, with class, with disability, with sexual orientation, with migration, with age. And so there are people like myself, if I think about my life, of course, I'm a woman, and at the same time, I get discriminated also because of my age, because I'm 24. I get discriminated because I have a chronic illness. I get discriminated also because I have Chilean origins, because I'm a migrant, actually, not just an expat, as many people say. Yeah, all these people face multiple layers of discrimination, and that's the key for me to make sure that also gender inequality can be tackled in the upcoming future. Speaking about specifically the gender pay gap and gender inequality, I would ask to people working in these topics, which women are most affected and why? Because of course, the gender pay gap in general, we speak about 13% less, but some people, even in the same country, actually pay so much less. Even if the average can be 13 or 20%, just because maybe they have a migrant background, or maybe because they have a disability. So I think we should remember this. I think also that we cannot speak about universal solutions to reach gender equality one day. And we need policies that combine both, the salary part, but at the same time, targeted actions for the most exposed groups.
How do you get people to care about this issue?
That's really hard. The thing I do the most of the time is speaking about intersectionality, because many people don't even know what intersectionality is.
Yeah, what is it? Just everybody knows.
Exactly. I knew it. But intersectionality is practically, we use it as a policy tool, but actually can be also a research tool, can be used in any kind of context. So intersectionality makes sure that when you analyze any kind of discrimination, you can see and you make it very visible that we cannot speak about just gender, just about age, just about migration, and that in order to solve, many social challenges, you need to combine these topics at the same time. And that's also why we have, let's say, as an association, like this approach, it's literally what stands out usually, because there are many feminist organizations, there are many LGBT organizations, many youth organizations, and most of the time, I'm generalizing, they only speak about that topic. We don't have one topic. We actually combine all of these topics because we want to make it visible that people are people. I am a woman, I'm a lesbian woman, I am young, I have a migrant background, blah, 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 blah. So how someone can develop a policy for myself, or of course my category of people if they take into account just one part of myself. That's impossible. So when we meet with policymakers, when we go to events, also today when I prepared for this podcast, I integrated this intersectional approach in my answers because that's the only way for us to solve many of the social debates.
And did you feel there has been made some progress on this intersectionality by policymakers?
Of course, when we speak with like-minded policymakers, I think that it's very important to frame it in the correct way. Sometimes, so I'm a proud feminist, and I say it like in every meeting I go, I have it in my bio on social media. When I do job interviews, it's there. Like I always say that I'm feminist. Sometimes I even say that I'm lesbian. I know that that's not the case for everybody. And when we meet with policymakers, sometimes depending on who the person is, I may say just we use an intersectional approach, like not feminist and intersectional approch, depending on the person, of course. And sometimes I don't know, as you asked also. And then I explained that this is just a different way of taking account different layers of areas of policies that they are already working on, and that this can actually have make sure that policy has an added value in terms of implementation. Because then you can create a strategy, you can create a directory, a recommendation, blah, blah, blah. And then if you don't think about all the kind of people that are going actually to be beneficiaries of that policy will have an issue in the implementation phase. So even those who are not so feminist, they understand the value of intersectionality. So I would say it's really more about frame it strategically and making sure they understand how different inequalities can also intersect.
In the European Union, like 36% of LGBTQ individuals, they face discrimination. And at this level, the right parties are saying often that activists in this field, they are gender ideology driven, gender dictatorship and so on. So why there is so much hate on LGBTQ also on the political side, because 36% is a big number.
Is huge. What I have seen is that this backlash is present on two levels. So the personal side, as I said, so hate speech, harassment, social media, negative comments, intimidation. Sometimes for myself, they also try to attempt my credibility in work places because I was an activist. And then on another level, it's more political because, of course, as soon as you speak about gender equality, as soon as you speak about LGBT rights, your work is going to be framed as gender dictatorship. And I have the privilege of being literally framed in this way multiple times, including by Giorgia Meloni. So
It's a good quote.
my dream is to go one day and say, nice to meet you. Isabella De Gregorio, gender dictator. So actually why this is important, because it shifts the message from fear, because they do it to make sure that the people are afraid of these LGBT strange people. So they literally have this kind of narrative, and we try, like our work is making sure that it's not about fear, but it's about making sure that people know that there are actually discriminations going on. And the debate becomes especially heated because it's about competing visions of our society. I don't like to speak about, we compete, but actually it's literally two different ways of seeing the word. So on one side, we see equality, inclusion, anti-discrimination, protections as part of the democratic promise in Europe that every person should be treated equally and every person should, simply participate in democracy and every person should be allowed to live with dignity. And on the other side, some political actors, still 36%, frame that actually this is not about human rights. We have to protect the traditional families, we have to protect the national identity, we have to protect the social order, blah, 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 blah. For me, what's most important to say about the backlash is that my worry is that actually this backlash is very present in the places where it should be the least, like in schools, in parliament, in hospitals, in media, like these should be the places where people should have freedom of expression and speech and where we should be free, you know, regardless of the fact that we disagree. Backlash can be used. And I want to conclude that with this. So when I founded Eduxo, I didn't found it together with the other co-founders because we sit at a table and we decided to found an organization. We did it because Giorgia Meloni and others start tweeting about this. And because it became viral. And that was backlash. And we were like, okay, exactly because we have this, it means that it is necessary to do this work. Maybe if everyone was like simply agreeing on our event, maybe we wouldn't have founded Eduxo. We used the backlash in the ordinary policy-making process to actually advocate more for specific rights. Very recently, actually, we did an event in the European Parliament for a project called Art for Love. It was a project, an artistic project with children and teenagers that came from different countries. And the day after, we were on the European Conservative, and the title was Gender Indoctrination of Minors in the European Parliament. So, with this, backlash is just the proof that this work is necessary.
Yeah. And protecting, traditional values and patriarchal society when around 50% of marriages in the West end up in divorce. And also like this hate, in your opinion, also comes from repression, societal repression of people that want to stick to a social stigma at all costs. So they are also scared of also what another view of sexuality represent because they feel that they are not comfortable themselves.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely something cultural. Change. Think about a company. When a company wants to create some change in ways things are done within the company, so it's a very small level, but then people have fear about the change. And this is literally expanded to our whole society. Many people, of course, are afraid of this, but this doesn't mean that that change should not be done.
No, for sure, but I'm not saying that it's just change. In my opinion, is also that there are part of yourself that you do not accept because what bothers you of another person, a different sexual orientation, if you are fine with your sexual orientation.
Well, that's a very, it's true. So, I would say it's still part of the change. The thing that people start caring less about their own fear and more about, I don't care, it's simply, I am heterosexual, the others can do whatever they want. It's part of the progressive change that we Eduxo and many other organizations and activists are doing. It will take a long time, but one day I hope we can reach it.
And it's a change that starts in school in the end, no? From the youngest generations. Do you feel some concrete impact, some examples you would like to share?
Yeah, so for us, actually, even in my personal experience, education for me was really, really important in developing who I am. So I'm not at all part of a political family. And I started doing my activism because of school, because of reading, studying, meeting with teachers that were good. And that was my privilege. And there I understood the value that education and the educational system actually have on people. Eduxo thinks that, also based on WHO recommendations, that comprehensive sexual education should start at the beginning of the school process, so like 3-4 years old. Of course, the far right will say, you're going to speak about sex to children. No, it's not about that. For example, when you speak about comprehensive sexual education for 3 years old or 4 years old, 5 years old child, it's more about, that you can say no. Do you know that you're not obliged to do something that others want you to do? Do you know that you can decide if someone else can or cannot touch your body? It's more about that at the beginning. And then, of course, going forward, during the years, it becomes more detailed based, of course, on the age. So education is really important for consent, for understanding how you can approach with others and with yourself too, and what's respect, what's dignity. And also it's about emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, understanding what are your emotions, your reactions. It's not just about sex, it's really about comprehensive education that should be done for any kind of relationship.
Yeah, and I think because it teaches you acceptance, it's not that it teaches you how to live your life or how to live your sexuality. It teaches just to accept other individuals as they are. And anyway, in my opinion, like even if I teach, diversity, that it exists, something that is not just being straight or heterosexual. Of course, it's not that if you are heterosexual, you remain heterosexual. This argument is, in my opinion, a bit stupid, and I don't understand how science is, for example, not backlashing on this public media. Why there is so much still in news media, this gender ideology, risk, and so on, like
because the right is far much powerful in communication. And that's my answer. They have more money in general and they use it better than center left parties, and this is mostly about parties and civil society organizations, because there are civil society organizations anti-abortion, anti-LGBT, blah blah blah. And they receive financing from these parties. Do you think we receive financing for parties? Absolutely not. So, and we don't receive funding in general. So, that's the main issue. So if there is money going there, there are interests, there is lobbying to make sure that these LGBT people and women and youth and blah, blah, blah don't have access to specific things. And so the gender ideology that doesn't exist actually is so famous because of the money behind the media and the power that these people can have towards, all these communications.
Why don't you get more funding, you think? Why is it?
What I can say is that we have now won our first European project, but first it takes expertise to apply for these opportunities. Second, it's really hard to have foundations or rich people just coming to you and saying, hey, you have a very nice project, we can help you. Because most of the time, rich people are interested in capitalist-related goals, and our goals are for social impact. And actually, there are some studies that confirm that actually investing in these topics can then in the future provide more money, but it's not immediate. And majority of the investors want something immediately. So the main issue is that it's really hard, and also many funding mechanisms have been cut after 2022.
Now, part of this backlash against, against these progressive ideas are also these conversion therapies. And there was now a citizens' initiative pushing back against those conversion therapies, which are essentially activities to try to convert people's gender or sexual orientation. Are these conversion therapies still very widespread across Europe? And do you think that initiatives like the ECI will do something real, concrete to stop this?
So long before the initiative and long before it reached 1.2 million signatures, which was amazing, both the UN, so the United Nations, and also the Council of Europe have been warning that conversion practices can amount also to degrading treatment, which is, of course, as you know, forbidden by international law, and also that can seriously harm mental health. For example, in 2020, the UN independent expert on sexual orientation and gender equality presented a report to the Human Rights Council, and they said, I'm citing, conversion practices are inherently discriminatory and often linked to depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide. So already before, this report urged many countries, not only in the EU, but in the UN system, to ban these practices. Sometimes just speaking about minors, because, adults can do whatever they want, as that's not true. And then, of course, at the beginning, the debate, it was more about, are conversion practices acceptable or not? While now, the debate is more about, how are we going to ban the conversion practices?
Can I just ask, for me to understand better, so these conversion practices, what can we imagine they consist of? What happens?
So the conversion practices can be very violent, at the same time can also be more focused on religion, beliefs, readings, but there are cases where actually people cannot, like, they remove any phone, they remove access to internet, brainwashing. Yeah, it can be very violent, and many have been. It's related to criminal law, actually, because some things you cannot do, even if it's not related to LGBT rights, like it's illegal. The conversion practices, to come back to your question, are still a worry in the EU. They are increasingly condemned by legal, medical, and also human rights bodies. They have been condemned by WHO, by the European Parliament, and many also psychologists and psychiatric associations. But today, 1 in 4 LGBTQ people have experienced or been offered some form of conversion attempt. Many people actually undergo these practices because they are obliged by their parents, or they have some pressure, also depending on the country, of course. So it's always depending geographically. There are some countries, like Belgium, for example, that have explicitly banned conversion practices. The scope may vary, so it's not always, as I said, sometimes it's just for minors, sometimes it's for all. It depends. But many other member states, including Italy, as also because of my experience, I can say, actually, these practices were/are legal. On the positive side, the ECI indeed gathered a lot of signatures from normal citizens. So it wasn't just medical professionals, civil society organizations that work on these topics. It was like common people that signed this ECI. And so this topic came back to the EU agenda. This is a major political signal in terms of priorities. It means that this demand is not coming from a small activist niche like I can represent, but it's coming from a lot of people. Now it's a matter of how we can implement this. It's still, as you know, we're waiting for the European Commission answer. What I can say is that this ECI actually includes part of the EU competencies for the implementation part. Of course, under the treaties, healthcare, education, all these topics, including criminal law, remains national. Like the competence is national. At the same time, this ECI is trying to mobilize some of the EU competencies that actually the EU does have, including anti-discrimination law, public health frameworks, victim rights protection, consumer protection rights, and also EU criminal law. The objective is to create a common frame against convention practices, to not rely just on one legal pathway, and then having a strategy to indeed building coordinated protection across Europe. As I said before, it will take years. What I can say is that for sure the ECI already has achieved a huge win. It wasn't obvious, absolutely not. And now the EU cannot ignore that so many citizens are worried about this. We are going towards the next European elections. This is also political in terms of, trust of citizens. And now indeed we have just to discuss on how these conversion practices should be banned.
And looking at these numbers and all that happening with conversion practices, how do you personally feel your relationship with religion also, for example, in Italy, like on this topic, because it has a huge influence?
In Italy, geographically, again, geography plays a huge role and no one speaks about geography. Geographically, the fact that the Vatican is in Italy, technically is geographically in Italy. There are two states separated, yes, officially. In practice, no. In Italy, not mandatory, but in practice, almost everywhere in concrete it is. In schools, we don't have just religion as subject. We have Catholic religion. I mean, that would be nice to learn about other religions. Maybe through education I can learn that I'm Buddhist. I don't know. No. If you want, you study Catholic religion. If you disagree, you can leave for 1 hour. Okay, so that's already something that can explain the situation in Italy. I'm not religious, and I developed this belief. Actually, I did catechism. And then I stopped going. I didn't like it. I was in primary school, and these catechiste, I don't know how to say that, they came to my house saying, why are you not going anymore? We want to have you there, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's not for me. I mean, I was very young. I was like 8 years old. Thanks God, my family did not oblige me to go. That was, I really appreciate it. And then, I even wanted to send, you can send this letter to your church and say, I want that you remove any sacrament I did. This language I never say in English, sorry. The impact of the church, not of religion, the impact of the church as an institution in Italy is highly present. Highly present in the parliament, highly present in parties. We have even progressive parties that have Catholic waves. The church is so much included into the educational system. They have a bank, they have a lot of money that is going to many organizations and parties and companies. So yes, the engagement of the church is very, very present, and I'm really, really worried about this. The reason why I'm not Catholic is because of all of this, but also because, as we know, the church as an institution, again, I'm not speaking about the religion and belief, because anyone is free to choose their religion, is for all the scandals also that have touched the church, disappeared people, including Emanuele Orlandi, and pedophilia, and I can continue with many other cases. And I think that's, again, something that at least we can create a bit of awareness in Italy through comprehensive sexual education. At the same time, literally last year, I have started being more I started practicing meditation and feeling that there is something somewhere, maybe for my own well-being, but I don't have a specific kind of religion or belief.
Yeah, and you mentioned all these sexual scandals, indeed, of the Vatican, of the Church, which is an environment that is highly, of course, repressive sexually, and also the homosexuality is also in the Vatican is hidden, but is actually above the percentage of the general population. So there, I think it's also very difficult to in a country like Italy, if we don't explain these links between repression and the discrimination against other sexual orientation to move forward. How do you see Italy going in the next 10 years on this?
For me, there is a huge need, especially as Italy will have the political elections soon. It's really, really important to make sure that we can have a progressive left or center-left party leading the government and trying, because it's not something that you can achieve in one mandate, and that's because of the cultural change I was saying before, at least publicly say out loud the impact that the Vatican has and try to progressively reduce it in institutions, in schools, in the healthcare systems, etc. Many times, and we know it, the church tried to silence debates, to silence everything, because actually they're another country and they can do it. It's just a matter of how kind they are if they help Italy in something, and if they don't, or if they try to push something in terms of lobbying, etc. It's just because it's their interest. They're actually a country in the international legal system, and it's also highly, entirely recognized. So that's we don't recognize Palestine, but we recognize the church. It's rare to see yet, even among, the most famous center-left political leaders, someone that speaks about the church. They're not speaking about the church, not at all. And because usually it's not so useful, and you put, of course, many other people against you because many people are Catholic. But this is not about the religion and belief that someone has, is about the institution again and the role, that the power that the Vatican has. So it's really hard to make people understand that these are different. And there is no such other religion and belief that has such a power in terms of international relations.
Yeah, also because it influences a lot of other countries. We've seen with the US, they have started rolling back abortion rights and so on. And then, of course, there are also splits between the US and the Vatican. But on this, I think there's a certain alignment. Did you feel that following this lead by the US, there was a ripple effect in Europe? Because, of course, some countries like Poland are still quite conservative, while others have tried to protect, even in the constitution, the abortion rights. How do you see this battle going on?
Actually, since the US rollback, as activists call it, in 2022, it's a bit nuanced. So there are good things and bad things, like in everything. It's not black or white. So for example, in Brussels, the mood for sure before was more... So I arrived in 2021. So I saw this change. And so the mood has shifted from a more progressive advocacy where people were more, let's say, it was easier. I would simply say it was easier to speak about these topics. And now they, like in general, the EU bubble has a more defensive posture to this topic. And the overturning of Roe versus Wade, of course, make it very clear that SRHR, so sexual health and reproductive rights, can be rolled back. I mean, one day you can wake up and you have less rights, even in developed democracies. And some countries in Europe, like Poland and Hungary, indeed have pointed out as the US as a good example, as a model to restrict access to abortion, also for LGBT rights, and to broader SRHR programming and financing. On one side, we now have indeed a lot of MEPs, exactly because there is momentum and this backlash, a lot of MEPs voting in favor of my voice, my choice, against conversion practices, and also other topics like the consent debate and others. So of course, if you feel that some rights are at risk, and you have some progressive and understanding politicians that understand that, exactly because there is momentum and there is this fear, they will vote in favor. More maybe than before. On the other side, of course, there are ultra-conservative organizations and anti-gender parties and actors, also events happening at the European Parliament explicitly saying they were anti-LGBT, and they have grown. And as I was saying before, they have a lot of money. And that's the thing that worries me the most. It's money. Where there is money, there is power, there is better capacity to reach people. So money in nowadays society plays a huge role, and plays a huge role for blocking SRHR discussions. And we are not speaking about the fact that these are basic healthcare access rights. I mean, in some countries you can access abortion only if you're literally almost dying. I mean, it's my body. Shouldn't I have the right to decide what's happening to my body just because my country may be publicly Christian, like Malta, for example? As a doctor, may I feel threatened just because my country thinks something, my government thinks something, and I cannot help a woman pregnant because she doesn't want that child? I mean, that's really violent. It's also really important to acknowledge the experiences of these women that sometimes, also thanks to amazing organizations like in Poland, the EU abortion team, Dream Team, literally pay for their trip to go in another country. They cover them. Sometimes they risk to go to prison. I mean, we're speaking about very violent situations where in Europe, literally in our borders, people don't have the right. In Italy, there are so many consciousness objectors. I don't know if it's the right term. obiettori di coscienza, that in some regions of Italy you have to travel for many hundreds of kilometers just to reach a doctor that is able to help you. And this is just about abortion. But SRHR is about more and so much more other healthcare rights. Evidence shows that investing in SRHR prevents unintended pregnancies, reduces maternal deaths, empowers women and LGBT people to live with dignity and autonomy. And this is about public healthcare. So this is also why nowadays Eduxo and many others organizations are actually fighting in the European Parliament and also with the European Commission, so at the political level, but also at the cultural level, because, for example, in the case of Italy, it's about culture again. And so in Poland, and so in Hungary, and so in many other countries, we have to work, as we were saying before, both on education to create a lasting change and make sure that people are have awareness about these topics and the impact of these topics in real life, even if they are not concerned. And that's also very important, because, and on the political level to have some legislative changes.
But why this backlash, for example, on abortion? Like, what do you make out of it? Because in Italy, abortion was right in the 80s, as also in the US, but now we are coming back to anti-abortion, and it's becoming more and more consensus among the general population. So why is this happening? Are social media? Is it populism? Is it?
For me, it's really about the role of religion, and also the fact, which for me is completely awful and I don't understand. So for me, if you are a gynecologist, if I am a cardiologist, should I refuse to do one procedure because I disagree? No, I'm a cardiologist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should I say, no, I'm not going to do that? No, because that's my job. So why, if I am a gynecologist, then I can refuse to do abortions? Because of religion. That's the only reason. Because of religion.
Yeah.
So, and this is so much normalized. And also, countries should guarantee, for example, in Italy, abortion is legal. So Italy should guarantee that in each region you can have an abortion. In each city.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to do hundreds of kilometers to reach a doctor that is able to help you. First. Second, of course, media like anti-abortion campaigning. We see banners in the streets. We see anti-abortion organizations doing campaigns. Also violent campaigns with literally violent images that are being used. And for that, I think that also, in every country, there is a public authority for advertising. And I think that each public authority should use that authority to avoid to have such violent advertising in the streets. That can be a trigger for women that had an abortion. That's not nice. You're just maybe driving your car or going to the bus station and being triggered just because there is an ad. Exactly because they have a lot of money, they are using usually business-related spaces like advertising. But most of the time when I hear limitations on abortion access, it's, for example, in Malta, it's about religion and literally policies that have been done in the country. When I think about other countries that maybe have you can do an abortion, but only in the first weeks, is to avoid that many people do it. But then these people go to other countries. I mean, banning the abortion, of course, doesn't mean that the abortion is not happening, because it's a healthcare need.
And I think that the core issue in brackets, is that politics is related to votes. And so I think it will be really difficult to see in the short term a politician in Italy going against the church, because you will lose a lot of consensus. So anyway, what you would envisage to do, to teach in schools that the religious view on gender is something that is extremely narrow-minded?
How you can do that? It's impossible. As you said, regarding the political part, it's strategy. It's political strategy. Many parties don't do that because then they will lose votes.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. It's a cultural change. It's more the role of the media, maybe making sure that all these problems, because they are problems that the church creates, and the role that the church has in lobbying, and the role that the church has in schools, in educational systems, etc., is visible. And the only way nowadays is through the media, because media has only the public interest, technically. Technically, the objective of the media and journalists is making sure that the citizens can be informed about anything. So I would maybe push the media to make sure that all these scandals and how the money of the church is being used, to make it visible. So more people, I wouldn't say all people because that's impossible, more people are and will be aware of the role of the church as a political institution and as a country, not as a religion. And also the civil society, as I'm doing here, civil society have a huge role.
But maybe one point I would still like to touch upon, not to create an impression that it's only Italy the problem, because there are many other countries across the EU which are very conservative in this regard. Hungary and Poland are two classical examples. The Commission has even launched infringement procedures against them because they put in practice some initiatives to discriminate against and LGBTQ individuals. Are these infringement procedures a good approach, or what do you think?
For me, they're a starting point, of course. As you said, in Poland we have the LGBT-free zones, and there are also other examples. For example, in Hungary, the government is deciding what goes into the school textbooks. I mean, it's really, really hard. That was a signal. I mean, the European Commission saying you cannot continue doing this. Sometimes they simply don't care. For me, the solution is something I haven't heard yet from politicians. It's my idea. I hope it will work one day. I can say I said it in 2026. I did it. I hope. So we have clear conditions for enlargement. So it means that in order to be part of the European Union, you have to have specific enforceable criteria. For example, the rule of law, human rights benchmarks like the Copenhagen criteria, and so on. At the same time, there are no criteria to maintain your status as a European member state. So even the moment you want to be part of the EU, you have to, maybe there are also 10 years of observation by the European Commission, you have to have these specific criteria. And 6 months after, you can literally do a step back and reduce everything, but you are part of the EU. So the EU now can freeze funds, can open these infringement procedures, but actually we cannot ask someone just leave the EU like this. It's not so easy, actually.
And remove the voting rights.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So for me, the ideal evolution would be to formally embed mechanism for the condition of the maintenance of the status of a EU member state. This means that these are the same conditions as for the enlargement. So nothing more, nothing special, nothing to change, nothing additional. But to have the same conditions to maintain your status. This means that, I don't know, once every year, once every 3 years, whenever, depending on the decisions of the Commission, we do a check and we assess if you still have the same conditions that you had when you entered, or better, I mean. Because sometimes, of course, there are so many benefits of being a new member state. And some countries like Hungary and Poland may perceive this as an entry ticket. Perfect. So I did this and that. Now I'm in. But then they simply refuse to continue the commitment that is in the treaties and in the different charters of human rights and fundamental rights. And so if a country systematically violates them, there should be a tool, a mechanism to make sure that we can do something for that country. Sending an ultimatum saying, if by 1 year you don't manage to come back to your original criteria, you will leave. Or should be a very specific agreement like for the Brexit, So I think we should change the legal game of the criteria of maintenance, especially as now we are more and more countries, which is very good. But at the same time, as for example in a company, less people you have, less risks you have. More people you have, more risks you have. The same applies for the European Union. I mean, in a very broader scenario, if one day we are 10 more, and then we have not 2 countries like Hungary and Poland, and maybe Italy sometimes we can also include it, but we have 7 countries or 8 countries or 10 countries having this kind of policies, everything will be also shaped by that because of the council role, because of the parliamentary elections, etc. So it's a huge threat for the values of the European Union. So yes, maintenance criteria. I said that.
Original proposal.
And Isabella, you founded Eduxo back in Bologna when you were 18, so a few years ago, and you managed to scale the organization not only in Italy, but also then towards Brussels, which is in itself a huge achievement. How much work and sacrifice can you imagine going into this?
A lot of work. A lot of work. First of all, I want to say I'm really proud because this has not been just my commitment. You cannot do all of this alone. So I'm really proud, and I really thank all the people that in these 6 years have supported the growth of the organization. I sacrificed a lot in the sense that I took the decision to invest my free time for Eduxo. I also learned a lot, did mistakes. Now I became an operations expert because I thought HR expert because now we have 70 people. More or less, I wanted to think on how I can make sure that now as a European network, we are in 13 different countries, we have 70 people and we are still growing. We will reach, I think, 100 by September. So it's really a constant growth. So how I can make sure that actually this work continues and continues and continues in the upcoming years, and that the people and the volunteers feel engaged within the association, and they all have their own roles and responsibilities, because then with so many people it's hard sometimes to, and who is doing what, and the difference, which is also what actually shocks so many people when they understand how Eduxo is organized, is that I organized it, because that was my part, exactly as an NGO secretariat with paid staff. So I hate the fact of having volunteering organization that everyone does everything, and you need to speak with one person, and then 12 people came up in a meeting and where it's not really clear what actually are doing and how they are organizing themselves, etc. We have a team divided in different departments. We have events, communications, we have operations, policy, blah, blah, blah. Team leaders of each team, every volunteer has a role, has its own responsibilities written. They have an average amount of hours they agreed to do every week. They are completely flexible. They take ownership. They speak on behalf of Eduxo. I mean, that for me was really hard at the beginning. At the beginning was so hard to let it go, So I learned how to do that, and now I can say I did it. So to conclude, I would say that for sure a lot of sacrifice, but also a lot of learning, which I think was really useful and a kind of shock for me as an individual, as an unexperienced person that never had leadership roles. Now I lead the whole organization in all areas, of course, trusting the people that are in leadership roles within the organization. And what I also think is very valuable in Eduxo that you don't see, not even in companies sometimes, is that we care a lot about the benefits that people have. I don't like to call it benefits, but there is no other word. So our members and our volunteers have free psychological support with a real psychologist. So it's not a random person doing it. We have a free career desk for their professional development. We have trainings every month. All of this is free, entirely free for all the volunteers. And we care. So if they see, for example, they notice that they're in the wrong role, they can change. We have internal mobilities. We have progression roles. So that's really something that as I said, it's developed more as a NGO secretariat, but this is exactly why I think we are growing. So yeah, I'm really proud of it.
Well, many thanks, Isabella. Very nice episode.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.